Think about your daily routine. How often do you reach for a drink that isn't chilled? From the refrigerator full of ice-cold sodas and juices to that daily venti iced latte, Americans have a clear, almost non-negotiable preference. We feel a cold drink is essential for refreshment, especially in the heat. Yet, if you travel to places like China, India, or much of Southeast Asia, you'll quickly notice that your ice-cold preference is a peculiar cultural outlier. Globally, the consumption of cold water is not a widespread phenomenon. Chinese people drink it hot, even in the middle of summer, let alone lukewarm. While not to the same extent as China, most people in Asia, including India, follow a similar practice. Why do they avoid cold water even though their climate is much hotter than ours? Let's find out why.
Want some cold water?
Even now in China, if you order a beer at a local restaurant, they usually bring you one that is lukewarm. Only in slightly higher-end restaurants might they ask if you'd prefer a cold one. Of course, if you don't understand the Chinese question and just sit there blankly, 9 times out of 10, you'll end up with a tepid beer. If you go into a supermarket to buy bottled water, it's usually stored at room temperature, often right next to the refrigerators. In stores in smaller cities, you might even buy a Coke that has been warmed by the sun. Of course, this isn't something that Chinese people do intentionally. It's simply because Chinese people themselves have such a strong aversion to coldness that they assume foreigners feel the same way. Their belief can be summed up simply: the stomach must always be kept warm, and consuming anything cold will lead to illness. There is even a historical record that a minister during the Ming Dynasty intentionally drank cold water every morning to hasten his death. In traditional Chinese medicine, cold water is considered the root of all illness. First, cold water is thought to harm the stomach's vital energy, called qi, leading to digestive problems. It has long been taught that a drop in the temperature of the internal organs makes one susceptible to catching a cold, causes constipation, and brings about fatigue and pain due to muscle contraction. Conversely, warm water is believed to be a panacea, aiding blood circulation and digestion, and even promoting detoxification and anti-aging. Therefore, in China, people are unconditionally advised to drink more hot water, not only when they are sick, but also when they feel down. According to traditional medical advice, the practice of drinking warm water in China is thought to have begun around the 2nd century BC during the Han Dynasty. The ruling class used this hot water to brew tea. However, even hot water, let alone tea, was a luxury for the common people. They could barely manage to cook rice with dry grass and straw and could not afford to boil water for drinking. Expensive firewood had to be saved for pregnant women, the elderly, or the sick. Thus, despite knowing from traditional medicine that warm water was healthy, boiled water remained precious, and for a long time, the populace had to drink untreated river or spring water. However, due to Lyme and Loess, the water quality in China was consistently poor, which led to the constant spread of many diseases. And eventually, the key moment that shaped China's modern habit of drinking hot water arrives in the late 19th century. At that time, China was a war zone due to the Taiping Rebellion. Because much of China had turned into a battlefield, people from all across the country poured into Shanghai, more than 1.5 million in total. Due to overcrowding and poor sanitation, cholera began to spread, and at its worst, 3,000 people died daily in Shanghai alone. Cholera spread rapidly north and south of Shanghai, resulting in high casualties even in the capital, Beijing. But a strange thing happened. The southern region of Guangdong province was largely unaffected by the cholera outbreak. The only difference was that many people in southern China already had the habit of boiling their water. Guangdong was a relatively wealthy area and could afford the firewood needed to boil water. This news spread across China faster than the cholera epidemic itself. Hot water had now become a matter of life and death. This rumor, combined with the traditional Chinese medical belief that warm water is healthy, cementing hot water's reputation as a panacea in China. It was Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the Kuomintang, the Nationalist Party of China, who elevated this belief into a national policy. In 1934, the nationalist government launched the so-called New Life movement as part of a national enlightenment campaign. Among the 95 rules of conduct, which covered clothing, eating habits, and traffic laws, drinking boiled water was emphasized in the hygiene sector. As Western concepts of germs had also become known in China, the goal was to prevent the spread of bacteria and disease by boiling water. However, due to continuous warfare and incompetence, the New Life movement did not achieve significant results. The National Hot Water Drinking Campaign was truly completed by Mao Zedong shortly after. Although Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong were bitter political rivals, there was clear agreement that, for the sake of public health, people should drink hot water. In fact, long before Chiang Kai-shek's New Life movement, the Chinese Communist Party had already been instructing its soldiers to drink boiled water. Units that failed to provide hot water were reprimanded, and soldiers who drank cold water were censured. Then, in 1952, Mao Zedong's communist government launched the Patriotic Health Campaign, posting posters on school walls that read, "Children must develop the habit of drinking boiled water 3 times a day." They also supplied thermoses to the children. Subsequently, it became a common sight for children to line up, holding their large thermoses to receive hot water provided by the school upon arrival. The distribution of hot water gradually expanded beyond schools to public places such as government and administrative offices, and eventually became mandatory for all enterprises. Hundreds of millions of people across China lined up with their thermoses at hot water distribution points. Thus, the custom of drinking hot water, rather than cold, was completely established from this period onward. A saying even emerged that the British invented the thermos technology. The Germans commercialized it, but the Chinese perfected its use. India also holds a firm belief that cold water is detrimental to health. This stems from the teachings of Ayurveda, the traditional Indian system of medicine. According to Ayurveda, drinking cold water forces the body to exert itself to raise the water's temperature, disrupting the body's balance. It advises frequent consumption of at least lukewarm water to prevent indigestion and eliminate toxins. This phenomenon becomes more pronounced as you travel further south in India. Despite the hotter weather, people in southern India are even more consistent than those in the north in drinking water at least close to body temperature, according to Ayurvedic precepts. Nepal and Sri Lanka, both heavily influenced by India, show a similar pattern as well. This is also seen in the Arab world. Even in the scorching desert summer, they drink hot tea to induce sweating, thereby releasing the body's internal heat. In addition to these, countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Myanmar, the Maldives, and Afghanistan also avoid cold water. There are various opinions regarding which is better for health, cold or hot water. Countries that prefer cold water argue that hot water is actually harmful, as it weakens the body's immune system. They claim that drinking cold water increases physical endurance and helps relieve stress. However, to conclude, the choice between cold and hot water is simply a product of the environment. First, countries that boil their water generally have poor water quality. High temperatures easily spoil everything, making hot water a very wise choice for survival in hot climates. Conversely, countries that favor cold water share the commonality of having good water quality. It is only possible in a few places worldwide, such as South Korea, Japan, the UK, Nordic countries, New Zealand, and Canada. Since there's no need to worry about water quality or health in these countries, they simply drink it cold to make it more palatable. However, water quality in Europe and the US, while varying by region, generally cannot be considered good due to high mineral content. But these countries invented something brilliant: the modern water supply system, tap water. The UK first developed a method to supply purified water to homes in the early 19th century, when industrialization led to urban growth. Thanks to this water supply system, hailed as one of the 20th century's greatest engineering achievements, Europe and the US were able to drink uncontaminated water without boiling it. In contrast, countries like China and India lacked both the technology and the economic capacity to build such systems. The alternative they chose was to boil water for sterilization. In any case, this prevented many diseases, meaning they made the best choice given their environment. Now, as times and generations change, The preference for cold or hot water in each country is also shifting. In the West, people are increasingly drinking room temperature water as consumption of carbonated drinks rapidly declines. Conversely, young people in Vietnam and Thailand, who used to drink hot tea, now pour beer directly into glasses full of ice. In China, cold water came along with Western lifestyles like cheese, beer, and coffee when the economy was liberalized in the 1990s. Unlike the older generation, young people in Shanghai and Beijing have no hesitation in drinking ice-cold bottled water and beer. Their consumption has made China the world's largest bottled water market, surpassing the United States. The sight of the middle-aged generation carrying large thermoses is now becoming one of the symbols of a bygone era.